I'm Ray Renzi. I'm a Buffalo native, born and raised in South Buffalo. I come from a very Italian family that actually both sides of my family came from pretty much the same place in Italy. So my grandfather, Luke Renzi, came over from Italy, and my grandmother, Carmela, and that's on my dad's side. On my mom's side, the D'Amico and the Malazzi side were also from the same area in Italy, on Abruzzi, from the town of L'Aquila. My dad and Maria's mom are one of 13 brothers and sisters who all grew up in South Buffalo. Helen was first.
Oh,
Anna
Helen,
was
yes.
second. My dad, Albert, Anthony, Luke, Rita, Janet, Mary, Donna.
Yes.
There was one that passed very young, Raven, that I'm named after. Jim, James, Jean,
My mom, yeah.
Margaret.
So Aunt Helen, to me, she was like a grandmother to me, right? And, so she helped take care of the other children. They all shared bedrooms. So there was like 3 girls in one bed, 3 girls in another. But then, the older ones were off getting married.
13 children in one bathroom.
One bathroom.
My mom she has one brother, so a very small family, and she was quite older, much older than my Uncle Pete. She always said she was kind of raised as an only child, and she was 16 or 15 years old when my uncle was born. So, but very similar upbringing. My grandparents were very American. They didn't want their children to speak Italian. They spoke Italian, and they understood. And I remember as a very small child, all my grandparents spoke Italian, and I understood. I could communicate. I didn't speak Italian, but I could communicate with them. But I've lost it over the years. As we got older, my father and my grandfather had houses back to back, and my father also owned the adjacent lots. So we had like a family compound almost.
Mm-hmm.
My family was involved in gymnastics. I coached gymnastics at the YMCA for a long time, and my sister and brother-in-law run a gymnastic club in West Seneca for 40 years. So we were very active in the community. We grew up very Italian. We still try to keep very close. The next generation are starting to do some of the things to try to keep the traditions together, like holidays and the different picnics, family picnics, and we're spread out all over the country, but we still can have over 100 people for our family reunion every year, and they'll come from all over the country. My grandparents always had enough food. That was their thing, was the food. And people would come from outside of the family, friends, and they just couldn't believe it. There was always enough. There was always to get together. The kids would be in the basement running around or out in the yard, and the older people would be cooking the food, and people would be just sitting in the living room talking. And it went from lunch to dinner, and there was no space in between. It would just flowed. You never got up from the table for very long, and lunch was served, and then dinner came at 5 o'clock. The main meal was usually 1 o'clock in the afternoon. There was always a pasta. On special occasions, we did a lot of gnocchi, a lot of polenta, feeding the whole family on. The whole table would be covered with the polenta and sauce and sausages, and you just eat your way in to the middle. And my grandmother was a great Italian cook, but she would read cookbooks and try different things from different parts of the world. Like, I'm cooking Mexican today, or I'm making this Hawaiian thing. My grandfather, D'Amico, was a head baker for Acme Bakeries. That's a huge baking operation. And my grandfather, Renzi, and my dad and my uncles, they were in the construction business.
So I'm a little bit younger than Ray, where I didn't know my grandfather. He had already passed by the time, I was born. So I only knew stories of his. So my mom was the 12th out of 13. So she had a lot of, older nieces before she was even born. So my mother did a lot of genealogy. She's passed, but it was very important for her to know the background. One of the things that Ray had mentioned about not having the language, the Italians weren't looked highly upon, in that era. And so they wouldn't let them because they said, no, you're American now, you learn that. And that was one of the things that she so regretted. And so she really wanted to see her genealogy and the history and where they came from. So when I did go over to Italy, I took all of the information that she had gathered, and I hired a car. And I'm so thankful for that because the landscape was so beautiful. And went from Rome into the Abruzze Mountains. And, I wasn't sure how everything was set up, but each little community is set up with a circle. And so that's kind of the common area where people meet. And there's a community board that, the residents will put up notices or announcements. It's someone's birthday, or they're going to have, a celebration of some sort. And on this particular one where we had the address where my grandfather was from, it had many, many Renzi names. And the driver saw someone sitting outside, so he spoke Italian and he went up to them and said, do you know any Renzis? Are they still here? And they said, oh, we're Renzis. And, okay, so here we are. We couldn't make any connection with the names. I did have the names, but they had family that lives in Niagara Falls, which is, 20 miles from Buffalo, but we're like, we have to be somehow related or know each other. And we just couldn't put the family names together, but we hugged and we were just determined to believe that we somehow were related, because how could our grandparents be from, the same area and not be? So we just believed that. And then I went on to where my grandmother was, so my grandfather grew up in the mountains and she was more down by the sea. And so we took that beautiful trip down, a lot of beliefs in Italy, about family. And that is the tradition that they did pass on to us, and, hold on to their loved ones and, appreciate the knowledge that they had imparted in the faith. So again, going to her area, the family name was there. The Mariotti name, was on the wall. So, and it was very humbling to, walk on, the playground, even though it probably wasn't a playground at the time, but walking on the playground and thinking they walked on here. Like my grandfather walked on this grass, and even though I didn't get to meet him, it was just a very special moment. So we had the genealogy 5 generations back. So then I got to see where each of their parents were from. So it'd be my great grandparents. And same thing, every time we went into this city, their little center, people sitting all around, they're like, come over here. I'd show them the names and they say, next time you leave that driver in Rome, we'll come pick you up. You're our family here. And they're playing cards in the street, at a table, all sipping coffee. So a community, that was large, but still it was where everybody could gather and meet and talk about their neighbors or not. And, but have that opportunity to be together. And it didn't matter how many generations apart I was from them. It was just the family name that was all that mattered to them, because then I became family. My driver, thank goodness, was able to translate. So we were having full-on conversations as he was, translating. But he said he loved every moment of it too. So it was a beautiful experience.
My children and my nieces and nephews now are learning that it is important, and they're picking up. When they buy houses now, they buy a house. Well, how can we got to have a house where we can invite everybody? My daughter bought a house that's got a basement that's like a banquet hall, and my nephews have kitchens that can fit 50 people easily, kitchen, living room, where we can all just stand around and have our pasta making days and ravioli day and whatever else we're going to have. little kids running around and everybody's doing their part. And somehow I think that's my way of keeping the traditions going.
Like the biggest thing for me, like I said earlier, was, to tell the next generation is to stay together, be a family, and pass on those traditions and the love and the kindness and the faith, to continue it, to carry it on, because really, like Ray said, we had family that came right from Italy, and, thought that there was, of course you hear the pavement paved in gold, and it wasn't, and it was a struggle, and, the Italians were persecuted, and, hard work and having a family bond, to rely on each other, to have, that support system is what got everyone through, and to take that step forward to further on and not make excuses for, what we didn't have, but let's make what we can have. And you need to have family support and structure for that. And, if everyone can just be there for each other and be kind to each other and support one another, blood is thicker than water, and your family will always be there for you, at the end of the day. And that's how we grew up, knowing that. I know I can go to Ray's house, and if I need anything, he will give it to me. It doesn't matter at what cost, so having that, and especially like this kind of generation, and going on to the next one, like figure it out and pass it on, because those are invaluable.
I'll be somewhere and I'll meet somebody, and it'll be a third or fourth cousin that we know each other like we just seen each other last week. And my friends will say, "Who is that?" And I said, "Oh, that's my third cousin's son. How do you know them?" I said, "Well, we know them. We're close."
Uncle Albert, Ray's dad, was a husband. I mean, your mom was such a spunk, and like I remember her saying, like, she would take the babies and she was going, which was probably him, she'd go marching for women's for women's rights, and that's what she was going to do, and he let her, whatever. So it was super supportive, always the male support for like the females and moving forward. One of the other things that I think about when we had those big family dinners of 30 people that were around, and, it just was always chaos. And, my husband now will say, "Why are you yelling?" I'm like, "I'm not yelling." And, they make fun of that, but it's true. It was loud, but there was always laughter. Everyone was cracking jokes and just truly having fun. They had to talk loud to talk over the next person or the 10 people who were over here. So it's not really yelling. I'm like, I'm not yelling. That's how I talk. That's how I needed to talk when we were growing up.
I was very young, and we were going on a vacation or something like that. And I mentioned, everybody's going. Are we rich? And my uncle or my grandfather says, "Yes, we're rich in family and we're rich in culture." And that stuck with me forever. You could have all the money in the world, but the culture and the family is very, very big.